To just sit there admiring this bastard who allowed himself such wild audacity.
For me, the only real way to ruin life is to take it seriously.
When it comes to creating the reality we actually want to live in, a huge amount of responsibility lies with the individual.
Let's put it this way. Theater exists for those who still need words.
Did God create the human being, or did the human being create God? And what kind of God did we create? One who watches us.
Does a person discover themselves, or do they recreate themselves again and again?
Do you see how brilliantly I'm creating a conflict right now?
Importance is just a reflection of inner worthlessness.
That was a 3-second experiment. Okay, don't look at me like that. I can't help it, friends. Hello, friends. My name is Olesya Koval, and today I'm hosting a podcast with two wonderful guests, Vadim Demchok and Leo Talpis. Today, together, we're diving into the topic of consciousness, creativity, and the inner theater. We'll be talking about how our inner state influences the world around us, how relationships and interactions with others are built from the role we consciously choose to play, and of course, how we actually choose that role, the one that steps onto the stage of our life. Before we fully move into the topic, I'd like to say this. I have a few prepared ideas, but I'm thinking that from here we'll let ourselves move more into the flow, so this conversation can become as deep, gentle, and engaging as possible for our viewers.
It's always important that someone gives the initial impulse. Yes, we're listening with wide open ears.
Great. Each of you works with human nature and the inner world in your own way. Some through play, performance, and roles, others through psychotherapy. What I'd really like to understand is this: through different forms but with the same quality of presence. What does it mean for you personally to look straight into the very essence of things?
Point a finger, who's starting?
I think this is a shared question, so Vadim, let's begin with you.
I think the most important request of our time, one that has already swollen and radiates an almost furious demand for attention, is presence, being here and now, being in this moment. All spiritual traditions throughout human evolution have pointed toward this precious state, something we can talk about endlessly, but something that's incredibly difficult to actually experience. I believe that both Leo and I, each in our own path and context, are focused precisely on opening the possibility of experiencing this presence. For me personally, theater is the key to entering this moment of immediacy, when we are no longer trapped in regret about the past or fear of the future, but here and now gain the audacity to create reality. It's an endlessly blissful, deeply inspired state. Some people call it flow, and there are many other ways to describe it. There are countless explanations for this deep joy, this explosion of ecstatic wholeness that happens when we arrive at that point, and I believe this is the main message the modern world needs to hear. And it seems to me that Leo and I meet exactly here. From this place we can then unfold further, pour out like an ocean into different interpretations and paths that lead to this state. For me, this is the primary therapy of our time. For modern society, for the modern human being, whether it comes through art, therapy, or any other form. I think this is the small launching pad I've created for our further conversation.
Thank you, Vadim. And what about you, Leo?
I think that ultimately what we can truly allow ourselves is the experience of unity, a sense of oneself as part of something greater. And I'm not talking only about human history or human society, but about being part of something larger in a much deeper sense. This experience, in essence, can allow us to see what is happening to us and our own lives in a completely different way. It can pull us out of our beloved ego, which insists that we are here alone.
So let me ask you this. If life is a theater, who writes the script? So is it us? Or is the script already written somewhere? Or maybe our parents influence it? Or the context we're born into? The ball is in your court, Vadim.
Once again, the roulette wheel lands on me. Okay, I actually have an entire book and even a full training program. though we prefer to call it neuromysteries. It's called the theater of reality. Building on Leo's previous idea, this work looks at a state of wholeness, a state where consciousness in its full potential organizes itself as a theater, a theatrical space where consciousness has the ability to observe the spectator, the ability to create a creative force, a kind of brilliant actor, and the ability to dissolve itself into a vast diversity of roles, conflicts, polarities, countless states, and so on. Role diversity, spectator-actor role. Through this theatrical model, we look at consciousness as a whole, and answering the question who creates, who writes the script. The deeper I go into researching the nature of creativity, the more I arrive at one conclusion: the responsibility lies entirely with you. Of course, throughout human evolution there have been countless contexts describing divine substances and forces. For me, these are all technologies. I'm not avoiding the question of what God is, but for me, God is integrated consciousness. You can interpret this as a human being in relationship with the divine, or you can see it as a theatrical structure where a person creates themselves as a kind of deity, capable of creating their own life and writing the script of that life if they truly understand the mechanisms of how consciousness works. That's my answer.
Very interesting. Leo?
I'm going to push back a little.
Which is probably exactly why we're all here today.
It raises the energy and I enjoy that. For me, the key point is the point of observation. I can observe from inside the system, and then I'm active. And it feels like I'm creating and doing something. Or I can observe from outside the system, where everything already exists. What was, what is, and what will be all at the same time. If we take a more rigid perspective, then most likely we are nothing more than peripheral devices. There's a lot of research, scientific and not so scientific, suggesting that the signal comes from outside and we simply carry it out. That doesn't make life any less amazing. It just shifts the emphasis slightly. Yes, we're playing a performance. Yes, the soul before incarnating already knows which roles it's going to play, and in that sense, we can often already anticipate who will appear on this stage with us. That's probably my answer.
Based on what you're saying, can we influence the script of our lives ourselves? Or is everything already predetermined?
As usual, extremes are possible, but I personally prefer the middle path. I believe there is a certain chain of events that will happen to us no matter what. But the form in which those events unfold can vary, and if we introduce the idea of a level of consciousness, or what I call a frequency range, then the higher I am on that frequency scale, the closer I am to the Creator, the greater, not dramatically but noticeably, my degree of freedom becomes. So the result of shifting one's frequency range gives me a strong sense that yes, there are certain things I can influence, but not through ourselves, through that connection.
Thank you for your answer. Vadim, I'd really love to hear your perspective. From your experience as an actor through composition, play, and performance, how do you look at the idea of influencing the script of your life? As the director of it?
I honestly don't do anything else in life except explore the nature of creativity. I really enjoy flirting with this idea and calling myself a fool, a clown, a jester. I feel very comfortable in this position precisely because of the depth of exploration into the power of influence that an artist can allow themselves when entering a creative flow, stepping onto the stage and interacting with the audience. This gives me the audacity to understand that in certain ecstatic states of consciousness, states wide enough as I understand them, which Leo has just been speaking about, it truly becomes possible to shape consciousness, to shape the perceptual field, and to tune it toward a maximally creative context. An actor who steps onto the stage in a particular state of consciousness, is capable of transmitting into space, I'll say it bluntly, of creating a space that then creates them, and in the direct interaction between the artist and the audience, we encounter this astonishing phenomenon again and again. And this gives rise to a deep confidence that in the context of creating the reality we want to live in, an enormous amount of responsibility lies with the individual, with their awakening to higher states of consciousness, their intensity, their boldness, their capacity to manifest, because depending on what I focus on and which versions of the future I choose to focus on, a very powerful resonant field emerges with consciousness itself. And consciousness begins, for some reason the words are tearing themselves out of me again, to admire this bastard who allowed himself such wild audacity to broadcast into space the vision that the world he wants to live in depends on him. And this extraordinary film begins to unfold, where sooner or later the main character becomes the artist as a human being. I think I'm being clear. And by testing these possibilities in the territory of theater, by listening closely to these phenomena, it becomes obvious that something profoundly interesting is stored within the phenomenon of theater itself. These explorations give us the audacity to believe that a great deal really does depend on us, on the human being. Is that an answer? And if not, please take me deeper.
That feels quite acceptable. Vadim, then, since we're talking about a shared field of interaction, when an actor steps onto the stage, how much do you think the audience influences what happens on stage?
The audience influences it enormously. And again, echoing Leo's response, it depends on the state of consciousness in which the actor steps onto the stage. If the actor enters in a contracted, ego-centered, collapsed state, focused on themselves and their role, then a dual situation naturally arises. The audience looks at the actor on stage as something separate from themselves. And this has been tested and confirmed in countless ways over many years. But if the artist steps onto the stage from a place of wholeness, and I'm certain that Leo and I are in resonance here, because he embodies exactly this model as I see it. Leo, please correct me if I'm wrong. Then the artist naturally embraces the audience with themselves, and the artist's consciousness begins to rest in this position. The spectator watching me, that's me. The creative force that generates resonance, the brilliant actor, that's also me. The expanding range of expressive possibilities, that's me as well. In this way, the theatrical model embraces the entire structure. What we're really talking about here is playing consciousness, and then the audience inevitably finds itself inside a field whose source is the level of wholeness of the artist who stepped onto the stage. From the very beginning, the audience has no chance. There's no counterforce against this. The viewer initially enters a state of wholeness. There is no separation. There is no struggle. There is creative capture, a creative flow. The actor boldly, audaciously takes the audience's energy, draws it into themselves, transforms it, gives it form, and then sprays it back out, hiding behind different role masks. And from time to time, peeking out and saying, "Do you see how brilliantly I'm creating this or that conflict right now? Did you see how I raged? Did you see how I was jealous? Did you see how I desired?" And all of this, of course, happens within a wide field of awareness. This, to me, is clearly the future of artistic technologies.
Let me clarify then. Does the audience influence what happens on stage or not? If we translate this into everyday life, does it mean that we, like actors on our own stage, are still the ones who initiate the energy of influence into the surrounding context? Am I hearing you correctly? That we dictate our state to the actor, and the performance either works or it doesn't?
Sometimes the conditions align, the audience arrives already inspired, already prepared to perceive a star. And sometimes the audience arrives overly critical, initially to resist. In that case, we find ourselves in a dual paradigm. But again, if a master steps onto the stage, someone who holds wholeness of consciousness. Then, after a few moves, the audience inevitably falls into the trap of this art, and the audience becomes the wind, filling the sails of that ship.
Thank you for your answer. Leo, I'd love to hear your position on this.
For me, there is one fundamental distinction. Am I broadcasting myself, or am I broadcasting through myself? If I'm broadcasting through myself, that's an entirely different kind of energy, entirely different possibilities. And then we truly exist in a shared field, engaged in co-creation. If I'm broadcasting my own ego, then it becomes self-admiration, importance, and that's a completely different story. This is the transition point. The moment when we become something else, when we stop transmitting ourselves and instead offer our body, our energy, as a channel for something else to move through us.
Let me explain where this question is coming from. In quantum physics, there's this idea that the observer influences the observed. So based on what you're saying, am I hearing correctly that the audience at a performance directly influences what happens on stage?
Absolutely. We are in a state of co-creation. And what happens between us always contains elements of influence from everyone who is involved. It's actually quite difficult to single out any one key figure.
I want to add something here because the observer who influences the observed object is not neutral. Oops. What kind of observer that is my path dares to suggest depends on the artist who is playing on the stage at that very moment. And this is where a truly fascinating insight lies. This is the research context. I won't boldly manifest this as a final truth. I'm open to counter-arguments. But my experience and my exploration of the nature of creativity suggest that the object is capable of creating the observer. And again, if we look at human evolution, there's a very simple metaphor here. Did God create the human being, or did the human being create God? And what kind of God did we create? One who observes us. Across religious traditions, we see an enormous spectrum of deities. People quite naturally create this creative resonance. They simply cannot stop themselves. They generate gods. In India alone, there are said to be 2 million gods. In every village, a deity or an entire pantheon emerges. One that creates, shapes, and plays with people's lives. And it becomes clear that deep within us as actors lies this incredible creative power. To create gods that then create us, to create observers that then create us. And if that observer is filled with a certain elevated quality of vision, it creates us in its own image. This is extremely curious, extremely intriguing. This is an artistic interpretation, of course. And once again, I'll remind you I'm a jester, which means I can afford the audacity of experimentation.
Let me allow myself that audacity right now. And as the moderator of this conversation, I want to ask a question. Why, out of the many roles we carry, the many sub-personalities we can identify with, do I choose this role right now, in this very moment of our dialogue?
This role gives me a certain degree of freedom. It leaves a little hidden door behind the canvas, like Papa Carlo's secret door, where I can disappear if I need to. It gives me a particular status of freedom. The elusiveness of being the jester at the king's throne creates a wide field for experimentation. In this role, I'm hard to grasp, because I can always bow, spin, dissolve into space, scatter into pixels, and then, at the right moment, condense again into a point of light in another role. This allows my heart to remain present here and now, without fear of being punished or slapped down. And this is an honest answer. It's not an attempt to hide. It's an attempt to stay alive in the process. I've never been asked questions like this before, and I realize that right now a very powerful research spotlight is pointed at me. I'm exposed in my vulnerability. So here's my answer. I am concerned that in my creative heat, my intensity, my drive, someone might try to limit me.
Vadim, given that we carry so many sub-personalities and roles, How does the process of managing them work? How do we choose which role we present to our audience in a given moment?
This is the center of the entire system, the path of play. We introduced this technology right at the very beginning. In our first course, in our first Neuro Mystery, Playing in Emptiness, I've already touched on it a little, and honestly, I'm very glad that I can unfold this cartography here, especially for Leo. I truly hope it enchants him, because for us, these are real technological keys. Keys that allow a professional not to burn out, not to be consumed by a role, not to be overtaken by the emotions we experience on stage. And we're known for allowing ourselves to experience extremely powerful emotional states in our theatrical work. That's precisely why this technology matters, and people are genuinely shocked, at least judging by the feedback, asking, how can you possibly allow yourself to live through such storms of jealousy, rage, desire, all these energetic paradoxes that could, as they say, completely blow your mind? But our framework is actually very simple. I've already touched on this. We train our consciousness in the format of a theater of realities. We understand that we are this consciousness, ecstatic, intoxicated by its own play, and we dress it in theater. We're artists, and that's our key, to see consciousness burning with the heat of play. As theater, we recognize that consciousness can observe, give energy, give attention. Consciousness can create itself in any image, and consciousness can strike a match, collide energetic identities in conflict and opposition, because that's how energy is generated, and consciousness is blown away by how full of energy it is, how rich it is in the diversity of forms. And all of this is the theater of our consciousness.
Thank you for your answer, Vadim.
Actually,
Oh, sorry if I interrupted you.
yes, so far you are.
I hope I'm following you clearly.
Okay.
Okay, good. If not, I'll signal right away. There are things in the theatrical world that,
unfortunately, are not meant to be understood, and perhaps never should be.
I think they're meant to be felt.
These are those domains of consciousness, where consciousness itself appeals to intelligences and positions.
And this actually brings us very naturally to the next question that I'd like to unfold here on the carpet of our dialogue. But before that, could you please talk a bit about roles and subpersonalities? How can we manage our inner subpersonalities? And most importantly, how do we change who holds power in this entire system of play?
We can simplify this a little. If a person is not consciously working with this, then in a very large percentage of cases, the one in charge is a traumatized subpersonality. And from its wounded place, it promises safety, guarantees that the person will never again end up in similar traumatic situations, which of course is a complete illusion, because by the principle of resonance, it is precisely this part that attracts those situations, and this traumatized subpersonality usually takes over control. One of the things universal therapy works with is creating the possibility for a small internal revolution to take inventory inside. Who else lives there besides this one? Who isn't wrapped so tightly in bandages, and whether there might be some more cheerful characters inside? A traumatized subpersonality always distorts perception of the world, of oneself, of other people. It sees everything through the lens of safety and threat, and naturally the very first thing it limits is contact, because contact in this position feels like the greatest danger. So the first thing we do is look for those subpersonalities that are capable of entering contact, even if that contact is still distorted. But it's enough to begin, because contact is the channel through which we can communicate with a person and begin changing both their inner and outer reality. In other words, we look for the one who is willing to be in contact.
That's a very curious perspective. Right now, I really feel the urge to somehow synchronize your two answers. Vadim, you started talking about actor-audience interaction. Sometimes it's something that exists right on the edge of sensation, not necessarily cognition or interpretation. And right now, as we're talking, a certain field is forming between us. Each of us is adding our own elements into it. So here's a question, let's call it out of my list. What emotions and sensations are you experiencing right now in this moment of our dialogue? And how do you feel each of us is contributing, and with what qualities? to shaping this field so that it becomes meaningful and engaging for our audience?
That's a fantastic question, truly. And if I may add a small compliment, it brings us straight back to my favorite theme. It turns our very conversation itself into this powerful message of being here and now. Right here, right now. What do you feel in this moment as a code? This is a grand tapestry of interaction. What kind of pattern do you think we're transmitting through our immediate presence? And this to me is the greatest treasure of theater, the most essential, the most fundamental one. As an artist, I can say this: you can only truly catch the audience, focus their attention through this extraordinary art of leaping into the state of here and now, and then unfolding it, weaving it further, strengthening it, pouring out like an ocean of emotions, and delivering the core message that theater, in my view, can give to a person who comes to it. And that message is this: absolute devotion to the creative potential of one's own consciousness. A person is a creator of unimaginable overflow of possibilities. They create the theater of reality in which they want to live, and they themselves are the main character. This manifesto to me functions like a code, a hook that can intrigue people, pull them out of the most complex emotional traps. And once a person grasps this holistic vision, you can bring any emotional experience onto the stage. I am seized by anger, and if I am trained in holistic awareness, that anger becomes a work of art. Boom. Bless you. And someone else has just entered our dialogue, friends. That's a powerful accent. Thank you for that interruption, it's perfect. And any emotional state we experience, when placed into the force field of awareness, wholeness, theater, reality, whatever name we give it, unexpectedly becomes a work of art. Look how brilliantly I just played this intense state. And this is something that I believe, and my team and I generously share this in our work, can be made accessible to everyday life. Yes, it was born in the depths of theatrical research, but it can absolutely become a practical tool for ordinary living. And as for your question, what am I personally experiencing right now? I feel an enormous surge of inspiration from mirroring Leo verbal virtuosity and from the clarity and depth of your formulations. I feel creative interaction. It's similar to what happens between two partners who know they are on stage, who know that many people are watching them, and that will certainly be the case here. Even when this podcast is recorded, edited, and watched later, people will still feel this gradual charge of immediate presence, because this is happening here and now, right now. And they inevitably become, as you said, quantum observers who are creating this reality for themselves. That's my answer.
Thank you so much, Leo. It's incredibly interesting for me to observe what's happening here. There are so many different interweavings, as Vadim put it, weaving this pattern on the carpet of our conversation.
And if I'm being honest and going deep, the three of us are currently playing a game called We Need to Talk. In reality, we could easily not talk at all. And nothing essential in this dialogue would be lost. Because the depth that's present here exists beyond words, it's rare to meet people with whom you can simply be silent. And honestly, I would love to sit in silence with you.
We could even do a direct experiment. Allow ourselves absolutely everything.
Though I'm afraid the viewers would fast forward.
So I'll step into a bit of confrontation and add some spice. Because my artistic drive is starting to rear up here. Then why do we even need theater at all? A viewer comes to the theater, and if nothing happens on stage, they fall asleep. Something has to happen. You don't have to make love. But for some reason, people do.
Let's put it this way. Theater is for those who still need words.
There are theatrical experiments where people come to a theater, an actor walks onto the stage and remains silent for an hour and a half.
And most likely people experience a whole spectrum of emotions during that time.
This is an incredibly powerful experiment because everyone ends up living their own theater inside their own consciousness. And that too is a great act of audacity. An actor who steps onto the stage and holds the attention of 1,000 or however many spectators simply by being silent is doing enormous work. Just to remain silent and hold attention requires immense tension and massive energy flows. A quantum observer focused on the object delivers a powerful blow right to the solar plexus. There is intense electricity inside the artist's body, and one must be extremely prepared to hold eye contact, to sustain that long pause of 90 minutes, and to transmit meaning non-verbally.
That was a 3-second experiment. Okay, don't look at me like that. I can't help it, friends.
No. This experiment can continue. We really could sit here in silence. Because what I sense, what I genuinely feel, is an incredibly charged field, both energetic and meaningful. And if we gave the viewer the chance to simply contemplate our stillness right now.
There's a sense that a certain state is being created in our dialogue, and the viewer reads and resonates precisely with whatever is important to them in this particular slice of time. Each of us contributes a different kind of noise, a different resonance to today's stage. So I think we'll give our audience the opportunity to enjoy our silence a little later. Right now, time is limited, and I'd love for us to unpack as much as possible. Vadim, if your life were a performance, what genre would it be?
Consciousness is infinitely playful. And in our neuromysteries, we even have exercises where we live through our life in different genres. And unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, I'm deeply refined, even perverted by these experiments. A better word would be highly trained. I can take the same situation, one that's troubling me, or one that life has placed me in, and live it as a comedy, a tragedy, a farce, a grand guignol, or any other interpretation. And here I think, and thank you for this question, we come to a deeper understanding of who is watching. So the question becomes, what quality of the quantum observer has arrived right now? Did they come for a comedy, a tragedy, something else entirely, a performance, buto dance, no theater, commedia dell'arte? There are countless experiments and games where the very same storyline is consciously played out in different styles, parodic, tragicomic, grotesque, and so on. And this brings us back again to the same question. Who is the creator here? Who creates this gaze, this refraction of reality? Let's say I'm deeply in love with a woman who doesn't give me as much attention as I want. I can play this story as a cartoon, as a comic strip, as a farce. As a bloody, self-torturing tragedy, as a comedy, as a stand-up routine, and so on and so on. And that's why this topic feels so incredibly beautiful to me, precisely in the way the question is framed. Who is watching, and am I capable of influencing the quality of the one who watches, the one who creates me within this genre, within this stream of meaning? And so on and so on. Returning again to the audacity of my initial statements, I remain convinced that we are capable of setting the genre, we are capable of shaping the quality of the quantum observer who ultimately creates us.
Thank you for your answer. That was deep, and I need some time to digest it. Dear friends, we're wrapping up the first part of our conversation about presence, creative responsibility, and the magic of interaction between actor and audience. We've seen how vital it is to be here and now, and how the consciousness of the artist and the viewer creates a unique field of co-creation. In the second part of the Dcast, we'll dive deeper into the inner stage of our lives, into roles and subpersonalities. Who steps onto the stage of our being, and how can we consciously guide this process in order to create our reality with awareness? Don't miss the continuation. You'll find practical insights and surprising discoveries about yourself.